So, language links today is about cooks in the kitchen, about cooking with your child at home. This is the perfect time, even though we are working at home and teaching our children. We do have a little bit of extra time. We're definitely all using our time a little bit differently these days. And so you might have opportunities to be able to do some cooking and baking with your child. And it's the perfect opportunity, the perfect activity through which to build language. Many kinds of functions of language, and we're going to talk about that. The next few slides are about CARD. If you're not familiar with CARD, you can read these slides when I send you the handout that I'm going to email you. I'll let you look through that, but here's information about all the different things CARD does and how you can register with us. Another thing I want to bring to your attention is a conference, a free conference that CARD is offering this Saturday, April 4th. It is a full day of training. We were going to do this Issues in Autism conference in person, but due to the circumstances, it's going to be all online. And so you can be at home and you can join this amazing opportunity to learn about strategies to support our children in regards to their emotional regulation. And so registration is still open. I encourage you to register. So there's all the information right there. We have one more language links date that we have set up, May 7th. Typically our language links runs through the school year, and May 7th is right now the last one we have scheduled. If we decide to schedule additional ones over the summer, we will let you know. So I thought this was a little cute. Who says I can't cook? You obviously haven't tasted my cereal. I just have to put this out there and be honest with everyone that I am not a great cook. I am not a great baker. I'm not great in the kitchen. When my children saw me preparing for this lecture, they actually told me that I was a fraud because they know that cooking is not my forte. However, when they were children, we did bake together. We did cook together, very simple things, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot, baking and cooking for us gave us the opportunity to build language, to build engagement, and those come hand in hand. So I thought this was a cute little meme that I wanted to share and to tell you a little bit about my cooking experiences. Today, we're going to talk about why cooking is such a great activity to do with our kids, cooking and baking. We're going to talk about things you need to consider when you're planning a cooking activity with your child. I'm going to share samples of visuals, and we're going to talk about strategies, and we're going to talk about the challenges that you might experience when cooking and baking with your child. And we're going to talk about strategies you can use to overcome these challenges. So cooking, primarily, in this case, we're talking about using cooking to teach language and communication skills. But as you can see, there's so many things that we can teach using this activity. So in addition to language and communication skills, we're also using cooking to promote listening skills, independence, leisure skills, safety and hygiene, nutrition and portioning. Those are really important skills for our kids to learn. Academic skills, there's so many different skills that we can teach academically: sequencing, vocabulary, literacy skills, math, community-based skills. The list is endless. Cooking can also provide sensory input. And for a lot of our children, they seek that sensory input, and cooking and baking is a very appropriate way for them to feel that input. For some of our kids, that can be a challenge, and we're going to talk about that a bit later. Cooking with our kids also provides opportunities to teach our children how to cope with disappointment when our recipe doesn't turn out the way we want. And to be honest with you, between you and me, I think that's part of the reason why I don't love cooking. I am a perfectionist, and when my recipe doesn't turn out the way it's supposed to, I find it very frustrating and disappointing. So this point to me is a biggie. I really feel that cooking with our kids with autism can really give us that opportunity to practice our reaction and how we should react when our recipe doesn't turn out the way we expect it to. Cooking is naturally motivating usually. Also, kids are more likely to eat foods that they have cooked. And so when we talk about expanding their repertoire of things that they like to eat, if they have cooked it, chances are they will probably eat it. And the other very important thing to consider about cooking is socializing takes place around food. And this is the way the world is. And so cooking and eating together with others, this provides a lot of opportunities for engagement. This is really important for our kids. So these are things that we want to consider when we're planning cooking activities. And I'm going to go through each one in detail. But we're going to talk about aiming for success, the type of food you choose, the complexity of the recipe that you are going to choose, how to present the instructions to your child, what are the goals of the activity, accommodations you can provide, and the importance of making it fun. So for one, you want to aim for success. You want to plan as much as you can so that, you know, things fall into place. The more organized you are, the more smooth the activity will be. You want to plan for the challenges that you think are going to come up. You want to have strategies in place. You want to have all your ingredients present. You want to make sure that you have all the ingredients organized next to you, all the cooking tools that you need. You want to think the whole thing through so that you can reach success. If the experience is challenging, some of the motivation dwindles. And so we want to make sure that you plan right from the start for success. You also want to consider what type of food you're going to cook. And you want to think about what your child likes, what your family likes. The type of food you're going to choose may be based on your culture. It may be based on what your child's friend eats at school that your child wants to eat as well. You want to also think about, are you trying to teach a certain skill? And so you need to cook a specific food that will practice that skill or specific vocabulary. You also want to think about, is this recipe connected to a learning experience that your child can connect this cooking activity with? If you're reading a specific book, are you going to cook something specific that connects to the book? So you want to think about what connections you can make. How can you make this cooking experience meaningful? You want to think about the recipe complexity. So There are very simple recipes out there, and there are very complex recipes out there. And you can see my sample of a simple recipe. It has 5 steps, very few ingredients, very clear symbols. The complex recipe is just text, many ingredients, many steps. You want to make sure that the recipes meet the needs of your child. You want to make sure that it's not too simple for your child, not too complicated for your child. And you may have to experiment with different recipes in order to figure out which type of recipe would be good for your child. And there are many out there. There are recipes that you can recreate to meet your need, but there are also so many different recipes in symbol form, and also just plain recipes that you can find online. Whatever recipe you do choose, you want to make sure that you do question your child along the way, or do things, make comments, or ask questions to make sure your child understands what they're doing along while doing this activity. So we always want to check for comprehension. When we talk about finding the right recipe, we can present recipes to our children in many different ways. For one, you can use visuals that are already on boxes that you're going, like a cake mix. They have visuals on the box for us to use. So that may be enough for your child. You may think that your child is fine with just a recipe in text. There are also recipes that are completed on YouTube. You can find lots of video recipes. You can also find recipes that are made out of photos or symbols, or you may choose to make your own photos and symbols to create a recipe. Some recipes also can have text and pictures. It depends on the needs of your child. You also may find that the presentation of instructions might be best just cooking next to your child. I would definitely recommend cooking next to rather than in front of, because it's easier for your child to follow the steps, follow what you're doing when you're next to them, as opposed to that mirror image across from you. And the other thing is, repetition is so crucial that you don't have to do this recipe just one time. And we know for us, when the first time I cook something, it's very rusty, going through the steps. But once I make this food a few times, it's way more smooth and quick. And so you should plan on doing this recipe a number of times. And you can make the changes that you need to as you go so that it's a successful experience for your child. Here are a bunch of samples of various different recipes. And so you can see the one on the left has text and symbols. And then the one on the right, the gravy recipe, is a little more simplified. It has the text within the symbol. And the one here on the left is about safety. Safety and putting food away, cleaning up. The visual on the right is really not directions or instructions. It's they're symbols that one might use during the recipe. And so we might point to certain symbols. Okay, now it's time to get the measuring cup, and we point to the measuring cup. Okay, get the can opener, we need to open this can. And these visuals might be very supportive to our children who are developing their language skills. These are some recipes that are on Boardmaker online. And so this recipe for pancakes has a number of pages. And so first we have all the ingredients, and then we have the directions. And the one on the bottom are the instructions. You have to stir and stir and stir. And we might use those symbols to instruct our child at various times during the recipe as to what they need to do. Give the bowl to the teacher. You hold the bowl and stir. So this can help our children process the language that they're hearing, as well as language that they might use during the experience. And all of these visuals help promote comprehension. Here's some more. Some safety rules on the left. This is a very simple, cooking schedule. First, we're going to wash our hands, then we can cook, and then we can eat. Something like that can be used with any recipe that we're going to use. And this one on the right, kitchen rules. Let's Cook Life Skills. I'm not going to play this video for you, but you can find Let's Cook Life Skills on YouTube. It's a number of years old, but it's still on YouTube, and you can watch these cooking activities with your child, or you can watch them to get ideas. But it was specifically created for children who were going to be learning language and cooking skills, independence skills, and you might get some good ideas. As you can see from the setup in this photo, this mom, I think she is the mom. I don't think she's the teacher. She's set up for success. You can see that she's organized. She has everything she needs. For some of our kids, if we're not organized like that, by the time you get the eggs out of the fridge, your child is on the other side of the house. And so we want to set it up for that success so that they attend, they participate, and they have achieved something. When you think about cooking activities, you also want to think about what your goals are. And we're going to specifically talk about communication, but you may have some other goals. For us, we're thinking about teaching our children requesting skills, commenting skills, protesting, saying, no, I don't like that, expanding the number of words that they're using, asking them questions, encouraging them to ask questions, and that social engagement. That's so important for language development. We're going to talk more about language, but think about what your goals, what other goals you may have when you're thinking about cooking. We can talk about that at the end. I'll open up the floor for anyone to ask questions, and I'll stop recording at that point. So for us, we're talking about promoting communication, language skills. And when we think about what we want to teach, these are some ideas. For one, we want to think about core vocabulary. And those are the words that are the words that string all of our nouns together, all of the words that make all of our sentences coherent, like the word and, the, it, can, you, see. These are words that are high frequency words. They're used constantly. An example of a fringe word might be something like egg. And so think about the various core words you want to incorporate into your language experience, and the fringe vocabulary words that you want to use during your cooking experience. We also want to think about joint engagement. And this is a challenge for some of our kids. When they're young and cooking, cooking is very fun, and we can use cooking to be silly and to be playful with our children, and to promote the engagement between us and our child. Joint engagement is very important for language development and vice versa. So these are all considerations when we're thinking about the language that we want to teach our kids. We want to teach our kids to make comments like, ugh, that's yucky. They have a right to be able to comment like that. Or I like that. Or that's hot. Or that's cold. We also want them to ask questions like, what do we do now? Or, and then? Or, can I eat? These are great opportunities to teach this kind of language. Cooking also gives us a chance to talk about the vocabulary around colors, textures, smells, and tastes. When you're cooking with your child, like I mentioned before, you can be really silly. You can leave out a step or pretend to put in the wrong ingredient and have them react, or use the wrong tool just to be silly to get a reaction. And that promotes that engagement, but also that use of language. So these are great opportunities to be silly and practice all those skills. When you're cooking with your child, this is like in big yellow highlighting, I would highly encourage you to take photos of your child cooking, or have someone else in your home take photos of you throughout the cooking activity. For those of you who have joined us this morning and who know me, I talk incessantly about creating PowerPoint books. And I did this when my kids were little, and I have taught many of you to do this. I feel that creating books of experiences that you have done in your life with your child can be such a great tool for so many things with your child. I mean, for one, it's a memory. But secondly, if you put all these photos that you take of your cooking activity into a PowerPoint, template, and then you can look at this book like a slideshow online. You can add your own words or just look at the pictures. You can also print it and staple it and make it your own book. Kids love to see themselves, and looking at this homemade book gives you the opportunity again to practice language and engagement skills. So for any of you who have questions about doing that, please feel free to reach out to me, and I can instruct you on how to do that and how to use it. Cooking has built-in motivation to communicate. We talked about that. And you can also, in addition to all the symbols and visuals for the actual cooking activity, the recipes, the ingredients, the safety, you can also use supports to promote communication, like this. I'm going to just show you many different examples. This is a core word communication board, and this is something that you could print. I know the words are a little bit fuzzy here, but it's just an example of things that we can say when we're cooking with our child using all of these core words, like you put, or take that out, or turn it, or that's bad, or this carrot is different. So having these words and symbols in front of us when we're talking with our child, we can use these boards, but it also helps our children find the words themselves, and they can use these symbols to help them use their language. They might be AAC users, and they might be pointing to these symbols as they are talking and communicating. but it also may just be there as a support for them. And we know that visuals are very, very helpful to our children, and it helps structure their language. This is a communication board that was created by a speech therapist who was using it with an app that I'll mention at the end. I'm going to give you that information in one of the slides. Toka Kitchen Monsters. It's an adorable app. I think it's $2.99 or $3.99, and it's all about cooking. And I'm not suggesting that you allow your child to, you can allow your child to just play with this app, but it's a great language building opportunity to play this app with your child and look at all of these communication opportunities that you have, all this vocabulary that you can practice with your child. I see core words, I see fringe words. So this is another sample. Here's another one of some core vocabulary, and think of all the different things that you can say with these words. Oh, it's ready, or let's take this away, it smells bad, or oh, it's all gone, we're finished, or look, come, the cake looks different, it got higher in the oven, it rose. So this is another example of a visual support for communication. This is a communication board. And here's one with more words. This is Word Power by Saltillo. This is another one. I don't like that, I like that. I want a different one. Uh-oh, it spilled. Here's another one. Now this is a great one. And this communication board would be specifically about what something tastes like. So it doesn't have the typical words, the typical core words that that give us more opportunities to build upon, but this is very appropriate for a lot of our kids to use to practice their vocabulary. And this is another one that gives a child an opportunity to express what they don't like about the situation. The blender is too noisy, or I'm thirsty, or I don't want to do this. We have to give them the ability to communicate all of this. So when we're planning for cooking activities, we also need to think about accommodations. And we might do a cooking activity once and then realize that we need to change that activity for next time, whether we're using the same recipe or a different one. Each time we do it, we'll realize things that we have to change to improve it for the next time. So for one, you may realize you need to simplify. You may realize things that you need to set up in the environment that set you up for success, that set you up for safety. There may be some tools that you know you cannot leave in front of your child on the counter. You want to make sure that you have the visual supports that are necessary to accommodate the needs of your child. You also may think about visual markers on cooking supplies. So maybe using like a black Sharpie marker to make the 1 cup mark, to make it very clear how much milk needs to go into this cake recipe. You also want to have visual supports available to help support behavior. So if your child may have difficulty waiting, you may have a visual sitting on the counter of wait that you can pick up to just hold, to ask your child to wait a moment, or a visual of stop, or a visual of, okay, take a deep breath, it's okay. There's so many different visuals that you can use. You also may want to encourage your child to experience the sensory feelings of this cooking experience. They may benefit from that. And you also may need to adjust the pace of the activity with your child. So to me, that means that if I know my child is going to have difficulty completing a recipe that takes 20 minutes, I might do everything very quickly. I might have certain things already measured out so that it's faster. So instead of taking 20 minutes, it might take us 10. It also may mean that I've done most of the recipe and they are just doing the last couple of steps. It also may mean that I'm going to choose a recipe maybe that just has 2 steps, or it may have 20 steps, depending on the needs of my child. And so these are the things that you want to consider so that it's successful. Very, very importantly, you want to make this activity fun. If it is not fun, your child is not going to want to do it with you, and then it's a language learning opportunity lost. And we all know that when things are not fun for all of us, we do not want to partake in it. And so we need to do everything we can to be silly and fun and engaging so that our children are willing to do this with us. Let's talk about a few of the things that go wrong when we cook with children. For one, sensory challenges can very often throw our kids off. As a teacher, I used to cook with my students with autism at least a couple times a week, and this was an issue for a few of them. So we do want to try to accommodate so that they will be willing to participate. If there's something that is ooey and gooey and slimy that our child does not want to touch, we may want to allow them to wear gloves, non-latex, so that you don't get that, taste and powder from the gloves into the food. But that way, that gooey is not touching their hand. If a child doesn't want to touch something that needs to be sliced, we may use one of the kitchen tools, like an onion slicer, to cut things rather than forcing them to hold things to cut. We also may want to introduce them to things that they can play with outside of cooking activities that feel similar to the cooking activity. If something is slimy, we may want to have them play with shaving cream, just to give them more experience with this feeling. Magic sand is another good one. Rice, there's so many different things that can give our kids that sensory feeling that will help them be able to cope with the feeling when they do it during a cooking or baking activity. And the other thing is smells. For a lot of our kids, they don't mind touching these foods, but the smell of foods is very, very aversive to a lot of them. And I know when I was teaching, I had a student who every time we cooked, I would have the garbage can very close by because he would start to gag just from the smell. He didn't even have to touch it. It was just the smell. And so I was always very respectful of this aversion to him. I would allow him to sit a little further. Eventually he got a little closer. And it's just something that we need to respect. We need to work through it with them. Some of our kids have fine motor challenges that will make cutting things difficult, even stirring things, even stirring like, a big bowl of a cake batter might be difficult for some of our kids. Very important though for them to do. Don't do it for them, do it with them, because it's very important for them to strengthen those muscles. I would encourage you to do hand over hand, and you're doing the hand over hand, very important, not to force them to do it. You're doing it to help them. They want to do it, but their muscles aren't strong enough to do it. So I'm suggesting hand over hand to help them do the action that they need to do. You also may want to demonstrate these skills beside your child so that they can see what their muscles are supposed to be doing. You also may want to try different types of tools in the kitchen that can do the same thing, because maybe a smaller knife will be easier for your child than a larger knife, or maybe a potato masher will be easier to use than a fork to mash something. And then also provide them with verbal and gestural and visual prompts if necessary, if that's all they need. Some of our kids have difficulty following directions. Even if we do have the visuals right there, it's something that our kids need to learn, and that is part of the language experience. It might help our kids for you to list the tools that they need, the appliances that they need, so that it's very clear what they need in addition to the food ingredients. It also may be helpful for our kids when you think about the type of recipes that you create to not say that you need a 1/4 cup of diced onion. You should say you need 1 onion to make it very clear. And then you may also want to break up the directions into more manageable steps if you find that you know, there are too many steps within one step of the recipe that you've chosen. So that's, again, accommodating for their needs. Some of our kids have food aversions, and this sometimes goes along with that sensory aversion. So you may want to start with finding recipes for foods that are similar to what your child likes, so that you're not choosing something totally different and they may not like it, but you know, you're taking baby steps to expand their repertoire. Never force your child to eat something that is aversive. If this is really an issue, you may want to consider food therapy, but you know, cooking in your home to promote language is not the time to address food aversion. So you want to start off with finding recipes that they're going to like. You're never forcing them to taste food. What I used to do with my students is, if they did find the food aversive, we would start off with them just touching foods on their finger. And maybe they would do that for a month of our cooking activities. And then eventually they would just touch it on their lip and wipe it off. Some of them would just taste it, smell it, and not taste it. And so we took baby steps in a very respectful way so that they felt safe and were willing to eventually taste things in very, very small amounts. So in a nutshell, cook and bake with your child. Plan ahead and be organized so that it's successful. Use visuals and communication supports. Plan ahead for any challenges, knowing your child. You know what your child needs. Try your best to plan ahead. And if it's a disaster, it's really not a disaster, because it's an opportunity for you to learn how to make the next cooking and baking opportunity better. And make it fun and make it meaningful for your child. These are, in the next few slides, a bunch of different resources that you can look into. These are books that you can purchase. Here's another book. This is an oldie but goodie. It has a bunch of visuals that come with it. I would recommend you buy the used book. In fact, I think at this point you may only be able to buy the used book. I think it's out of print. Here's another one. And these are apps. This is the Toka Kitchen one. There are a couple of Toka Kitchen ones. And Grandma's Kitchen. Here are some other ones that you can look into. And again, I'm not suggesting that these are apps. Of course, your kids can play on their own, but I'm suggesting these apps for you to do with them, because these are language building opportunities during which you can practice various vocabulary, various functions of language, and engage with your child in a meaningful way. Here are some more. And then the last slide, you'll see our contact information. And I hope you'll reach out to us with any questions. This is actually the last slide. If you are not registered with CARD and you do want to register, this is the contact information.